Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris here with you for another week. This week, a band that I am shocked we have not talked about in any great length to this point, Kamelot and their 2001 release, Karma. But before we get there, Chris, my man, how are you?
I'm good. I'm on vacation right now, but I'm always available to discuss Kamelot.
Yeah, I appreciate you being able to come on. We're doing it around your vacation schedule. A little peek behind the curtain. It is Thursday night. This will be coming out on Monday. I think you're on vacation for another few days, which should be awesome. And I think you picked a fantastic choice. I'm really excited to talk about this, and I'm sure we'll get into a little bit of conception as well. But before we get there, a couple of news items, a couple of new albums and singles that came out this week that I think are worth mentioning. Your favorite prog power stalwart, Evergrey, came out with a new single called Save Us. It was released earlier today. It is, I guess, a prelude to their album coming out on May 20th called A Heartless Portrait. I'm sure long-term Evergrey fans will really, really enjoy the single. I thought it was pretty good myself. And, new fans of the band, you can pretty much start with anything they've done in the last 5 or 7 years, and it's going to pretty much sound the same as the more recent stuff. I happen to be partial to some of the older stuff, but I definitely think that even you should give this one a listen. I think you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, we'll see.
There you go. And one other band who I've never really gotten into that much, and that's Hibria, the Brazilian power metal band. But they released a new album, I believe it comes out tomorrow, called Metamorphosis. And this one was actually pretty good. I enjoyed it. I thought the production was fantastic, and it sounded better than anything they've done to date. So you may want to check that out as well.
Cool.
Yeah, so we'll get right into it. We got going back over 20 years to 2001, July 9th to be exact, Kamelot's fifth full-length album called Karma. Why this one as opposed to any of the others? I feel like you could have gone in a number of directions because the band has had like so many sounds over the years, and so many different like lineup changes which kind of changed their sound. Why did you go with Karma?
I think that this album kind of represents the of this era of Kamelot. This Roy Khan, Thomas Youngblood songwriting force with Casey Grillo and Glenn Barry filling out the rest of the band with the bass and drums. I love Fourth Legacy. It was my first Kamelot album, and I think it holds up really well, and it just holds a special place for me because it was my first. And I think that the Black Halo is also one of the best Kamelot albums of all time. And I never really got into Epica for whatever reason. It never really resonated with me. But I think that of those 4 albums, I think Karma is their best. It's my favorite. And then, because I think that before Fourth Legacy, they released 3 albums that I think had kind of a different vibe to them. And after Black Halo, I felt like they kind of went into a kind of like a more darker and more orchestral kind of direction for the last 2 albums that they did with Roy Khan before he would leave the band, and Tommy Karavik would take over, and then they would almost discover kind of like a newer sound at that point. But I just think that Karma really just represents this peak era of this Kamelot lineup. And going back and listening to it again, I think I stand by that opinion because I just really, really enjoyed listening to this again.
Yeah, it's funny. I first heard these guys when Fourth Legacy came out as well. I'm sure we probably got it together or darn near close, based on it coming out in 1999. But my first exposure to Khan was obviously in Conception, years prior, and obviously on the heels of Flow, which I just I don't think I ever appreciated as much when it came out, but now it happens to be my favorite Conception album. Their they were really a groundbreaking band. And it's kind of funny to me how this Norwegian band does, so many great things. They kind of hit their peak in the 90s. They break up. Obviously, they've since gotten back together. But Roy Khan then hooks up with Thomas Youngblood, and they release just a series of great albums, beginning with Siege Perilous, and then the Fourth Legacy, and obviously Karma, and they would go on from there. But it's just amazing how they hooked up, and it was kind of magic when it came to songwriting. And to be clear, it sounds nothing like Conception. I mean, nothing like Conception. But they really found their stride, if you will, I think, with Fourth Legacy, and they kind of continued it with Karma. I will say that going into this week, I always kind of, if you would have asked me what's your favorite Kamelot album, I think I would have definitely said Fourth Legacy. I have just such a soft spot for that album. And I went back and listened to that as well, just to kind of compare it with Karma, listening to them straight through. My opinion, I think, has changed. Fourth Legacy has like a charm to it and almost a grittiness to it for the time when it came out, and it's got some fantastic songs, some of which are my absolute favorites by the band. But I think that this album, Karma, is actually a more complete album from A to Z, from beginning to end. And although I don't know that it has all the high spots that Fourth Legacy had, I don't think it has any of the down moments that Fourth Legacy has, and I actually think it's a better album, and quite frankly, their best album. I know a lot of people love Black Halo. I think it's kind of top-heavy, whereas this album, although it certainly starts off with a bang, and we'll get into it, I feel like it never lets up, and it's just one great song, or at the very least, a very good song after another, whereas with the Black Halo, I kind of thought it had some dead spots, towards the middle and the end of that album.
Yeah, I think those are fair assessments. I agree for the most part. I think some of the best songs on Black Halo are some of the best Kamelot songs of all time, but maybe just because there's like some interludes and it's kind of telling a story. I never realized that Black Halo is actually thematically a sequel to Epica. So that I never really realized. I don't think I ever really dug into the whole plot of either of those albums. So maybe that's why, I don't know, maybe that's why Epica never really, I don't know, something about that album, just I would get lost after Center of the Universe, which I think is such a phenomenal song, and it's such a great live track that I've heard Kamelot play, numerous times, but I just couldn't grasp the rest of it. I don't know why. Maybe it was just the poor timing of having to follow this, but this is just, to me, this is just vintage perfection from Kamelot, and I just absolutely love this album. I knew that I loved it, and then I realized, listening to it again, that I loved it more than I thought I did.
Yeah, I'm going to say something up front, and it's kind of weird. I was actually really depressed listening to this album this week, and you say, well, why? This is a fantastic album, and I agree with you. This is peak Kamelot. This is peak power metal for me, like the late 90s and 2000, 2001. To me, that will always be the best era of power metal. It basically took everything that Helloween had been doing and everything that Blind Guardian had been doing, but you're getting fantastic releases from Gamma Ray, and you're getting fantastic releases from Kamelot and Labyrinth, and all these bands, Angra, would really, have some great albums in the mid to late 90s as well. To say nothing of bands like Rhapsody and kind of like the new wave of power metal bands. What depressed me, though, was I think that my love affair with the genre kind of started dying after this album. And I'm not suggesting that there's not some good power metal in the last 20 years. If you see my top 50 list, I think you can agree that I still enjoy the genre, but not as much stands out to me as it did kind of in this time period. And when I listen to this album and I try to strip away the nostalgia factor, this album is just much better than anything I think I've heard in the last 20 years, give or take an album here or an album there. But even the new Hibria album, which I mentioned earlier, and I enjoyed it for what it was, it doesn't hold a candle to this album or anything that was kind of coming out at this time. And so it was depressing to me to kind of go back and realize that the heyday for a particular genre may have kind of come and gone, at least for my ears. So that was depressing. But by the same token, I thoroughly enjoyed every time I got to listen to this album, because it's 50 something minutes in length, but it feels 55 minutes in length, but it feels like a half an hour, because it just flies by when you're listening to it.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. I mean, I think that there was just this glut of fantastic power metal albums coming out in the, like you said, like mid to late 90s into 2000. And that's kind of where I kind of lost my interest in metal in general. I think was a little bit after the time that this album came out, because, you had this and, within like this year and the year before, it was like Dawn of Victory by Rhapsody and Dark Ride by Halloween. The Master Plan debut album, I think, came out around this time. Dragon Force's debut. These are all albums that we've talked about. But I remember, like, even in 2000 when Hammerfall's Renegade album came out, I was like, it's just like, oh man, it just doesn't hold up to Legacy of Kings. And it's just kind of like, I think that bands are starting to, I don't know, there's just some sort of magic about that late 90s and into 2000, that whole era, as far as power metal goes. It's different now. I don't know if I could put it into words as well as you did, but I'm with you. Like as much as I enjoy Kamelot, I feel like they haven't come close to touching the quality start to finish of this album in quite some time.
Yeah, and it's funny because I do like the newer material for what it is, and especially when I don't compare it to Karma or Fourth Legacy, but it's different, and I don't think it's quite as catchy, or really I don't think it has the hooks, and maybe that's what it is that I think the new albums lack. I think is a musical experience. They're very good, and obviously I happen to think the world of Tommy's vocals. I almost think that Kamelot holds him back a little bit. I think he sounds better in Seventh Wonder, like we had discussed when we talked about Mercy Falls in the archives. But this was really just Khan at his best, and I think he sounds better in Kamelot than he did in Conception at times. And I think that it was a magical combination. And as much as I enjoy the new stuff, I don't think it quite grabs me the way that this stuff did, because it was, from the first listen, you were just hooked by some of these songs. And having not listened to it for a while, it hooked me again as if I was listening to it for the first time. The one thing I say before we'll talk about the album, and this is something I just do not understand, why they do not incorporate more songs from this era in their set list. You are lucky if you get one or two songs from this entire period, and usually you get one or two from the Black Halo. But every one of these songs I would be thrilled to see live, and I just think that day has come and gone, and I don't think they have any interest in going back there. To me, that's a shame, because I'll get to one or two in particular that I don't think they've even ever played live, but there's some just absolute gems on here which scream to be played live, and I feel like would go over exceptionally well.
Yeah, I mean, even years ago, I feel like they only really ever played Forever and Karma, and then I think slowly, I think Karma kind of fell off, and then Forever was like the last one. I think that their last full tour, like even that fell off, and I think that at a certain point they weren't playing anything from either this album or Fourth Legacy, and you could just tell, like, the more new material they would release, the more they would kind of focus on that, which is understandable. I mean, it's a new singer, you kind of want to focus on the stuff that he was there for. It's not like Halloween was going out with Andy Darris and redoing Keeper 2 every night. They throw you a bone with Dr. Steen and Eagle Fly Free, but I mean, they've tried to focus on the songs that were sung by Andy Darris, which, it makes sense. But But I mean, as far as we're concerned, we'd rather just hear the band's best songs, and a lot of their best songs were on this album and on the Fourth Legacy. I would argue.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you. And it just like, I was looking back just this week at some of those old Kamelot set lists. Never mind Prague Power, but they would come to New York City in 2005 and 2006 and 2008. And because of the material at that point, like I saw them on the Black Halo tour and they played 3 songs off of Karma. Now they played Forever and Karma, as you had mentioned. They also played The Spell, which is a really, really good live track. I think it's better than it is actually on CD. But at that show, I got to see songs like Knights of Arabia off the Fourth Legacy. I mean, it was just, I long for that. Those were some of the best Kamelot shows that I've ever seen, and I don't think they're ever going to get there again. And when you look at the new set lists, they don't go anywhere near this stuff. I mean, you get Center of the Universe. You might get The Haunting, you get March of Mephisto, and that is it. That is it, and then it's all the new stuff. I'm not suggesting that they need to change set lists every night like it's Dream Theater in 2002, but throw in something. Cycle in 3 different songs throughout the course of a tour and give one to the fans at any given show, just because I feel like they kind of owe it to like the long-time fans that have been listening to this stuff for 25 years.
Yeah, I mean, seeing Kamelot live doesn't really excite me the way that it used to, just because I know they're not going to play like most of my favorite songs by them, and that's, I guess every band evolves differently, but I mean, I feel the same way about a band like Symphony X as well. Like, if you're going to play all your newer stuff, that's you have every right to, but somebody like me who has a soft spot for a lot of the older material, I'm just not going to be as interested in, especially for someone like me who, whenever I want to see a concert, I have to travel, a decent amount out of my way to go see it. Like, you really have to, I guess, earn my attendance at these shows. So, like, I'm not going to go travel out of my way to see Kamelot or Symphony X. If they played in my town, sure, I would go. But I'm not going to take a 7-hour, or 6-hour car ride to New York City to see them play the same set list ever, of a bunch of songs that I like but don't love. I mean, that's just my personal feelings about it. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Let's with that said, let's get into it. The album opens up with kind of a standard instrumental track called Regalis Apertura, and it's actually written by the man, the myth, the keyboard player on this album, and obviously the producer and mixer and masterer extraordinaire Miro,
former TNT champion.
Yeah, exactly. Different Miro, but a really cool opening track, and I think it kind of just sets the stage for what the album is. This is not the only time they've kind of used one of these 2-minute intro tracks. I do think this is one of their best, and it almost sounds like a precursor into going into battle type of thing, but it goes right into one of the classic Kamelot tracks, and kind of one of those songs that I would play for someone if I said, describe the band. Forever might be the track I play for them. This is just classic Kamelot here. Casey Grillo really, really stands out, and he's been out of the band for quite some time. He's playing with Queensryche now, but he is a very, very tight drummer, and I think that he just kind of holds this thing together and kind of makes it not go off the rails, because there are parts of this that are really, really heavy and really, really fast. But the orchestration is a really nice touch. It doesn't overwhelm the material, but it's there in spots. And then Khan, obviously, singing over the top of this thing, which is just fantastic. I'm sure you love this track, but I want to hear your thoughts.
Yes, I absolutely do. I mean, like you said, it's pretty much, it hits all the notes of that era of Kamelot, with just the sweeping vocals by Khan, and just all the instrumentation is so crisp and sounds fantastic. It all blends together perfectly. The symphonic elements, it's power metal, it's symphonic metal, it's It's catchy, it's fast, it's exciting. It's just everything you could ask for in this style. And I think around this time, like there wasn't really a lot of bands that were kind of doing, like, there were symphonic power metal bands. Nightwish had definitely made a name for themselves at this point, but their vocal style was so operatic that like this kind of had more of a classic, like a classic male vocalist style. And Khan's voice is just so distinct and unique. And I think it was just such a fantastic, marriage of his voice and his songwriting ability to join with Tom Youngblood. And I think that this was really, like I said before, they were the peak of their, the magic that they did together. And this album and the album that preceded it and the album that followed it, has that same kind of, your classic power metal minute and a half inch, kind of like classical musically styled intro. And it just kind of gets you like amped up for the big, fast, exciting first, like full length track. And Forever, yeah, certainly, fills that spot at track number 2. And like you said, it's just a wonderful, a wonderful song that you could look forward to when the band would play live up until just, recently.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And what's interesting to me about Khan in general, unlike a lot of the power metal singers, for a lot of the great bands that I mentioned earlier, your Halloweens, your Angras, Khan doesn't have that high-pitched wailing sound, that an Andre Matos or a Michael Kiss kind of perfected and are known for. He almost reminds me, and maybe it's due to his like classical and opera training, but he almost reminds me of Matthias Blad from Falconer, who we discussed a couple of weeks ago, because he does sing in that lower register, but with such power and such precision and with such grace that it's just like it stands out because it's not that high pitched, Timo Colti-Belto vocals, which I love, but this was different, and he's just so good. The closest comparison I would make, although they don't sound the same, is like that Falconer sound because he's in that lower register.
Yeah, I never really thought about that, but now that you mention it, it's totally on point. I just think at the time, like it was like hearing. I mean, granted, we had heard him in Conception, but like you said, that was like definitely a more progressive style band, while this is more of a power metal style band. And it's amazing how he managed to fit both bands so well. Like he's such a great fit for both. And I guess that just shows the kind of versatility that he had as a vocalist. But I'm still so bummed that I never actually got to see him sing with Kamelot. I came so close to when they headlined Prague Power, and he left the band weeks before that performance, and they did end up doing a really memorable performance with Michael Erickson from Circus Maximus kind of like standing in for him. And I remember they played Knights of Arabia and at least a couple of tracks from Fourth Legacy and Karma, and that was incredible. Probably will always go down as my favorite live Kamelot performance, and I've seen them a number of times. But curious your thoughts on track number 3, Wings of Despair.
It's funny. This is one of my all-time favorite songs, period. Like, point blank. I would put this song up against any power metal song kind of written in the last 20 years. I think it's Kamelot's best song. I think it's simple, but it's just so catchy. And it's everything from the riff during the choruses to even the one and only time I'll probably talk about a bass line on this entire album, and these keyboards that are just coming in at the right times and popping during the bridge. It has that instrumental section with that power metal gallop that we sometimes talk about. A solo on this album, which is so simple but effective. It's just a brilliantly written song. And when you're not looking for, as a prog guy, sometimes it's nice to just strip everything away and listen to a really good song. This is a fantastic song. I would have easily chosen it as my song of the week, but I purposely am not because it was almost too easy. I knew that I loved this track going into it. I wanted to pick something else, but I think this song is just perfect. I wonder if you hold it in as high esteem as I do because, like I said, I just think it's absolutely perfect.
It's my song of the week.
Nice. So I get to listen to it again. I'm really glad to hear that.
Of your soul, holding the truth in the cross that you bear, die with a heart that is bold. Fly on the wings of despair, no one is holding you back. The call on the one is eternal. Holding you conquer the silence you bear. Tomorrow with nothing to bear, a new day is dawning. Remember, no one can save you.
Yeah, I think it kind of dawned on me, I don't know, maybe a year or two ago. I don't know why. It may have just come on randomly, and I was like, wow, I forgot how good this song is. And I just listened to it a million times since then, and I think that it might be my favorite Kamelot song ever. And
yeah,
I just think it's that good. Everything about it is just vintage. This era, Kamelot, everything. Like you said it. I just love the song. I think it's wonderful.
We are in absolute complete agreement, and there's really nothing else that can be said other than I will post it this week, and I encourage everyone to listen to it. I will be listening to it again.
I love I just will say, like, throughout the album, you're going to hear these kind of like layered vocals, and it sounds so awesome when Kamelot does it on this album. And this song especially.
And the mix holds up very well for an album from 20 plus years ago. It still sounds excellent. And you put it up against all the mixes that you hear, with the newer albums, this is every bit as good. It never lost any of its luster. Yeah,
agreed. I mean, I feel like the drums, you mentioned Casey Grillo before, like the drums are just mixed so well where they're so effective, but at the same time they're not like overbearing and drowning out everything else. Like just really good stuff. And I guess you shouldn't be surprised because I mean, again, you look at this lineup of people involved in like Miro and Sasha Paith with the the producing and stuff, and like this dude was just like the polisher of all polishers, like he was taking diamonds and turning them into flawless diamonds. I mean, that's really what it was. Yeah. And Miro's a name that you always see kind of attached to Sasha, a lot of times, like especially around this time. And now they're both involved with Avantasia. It's just no surprise to me that when you see those names attached to an album that you love so much, you're like, well, of course.
It should come as no surprise, I guess, at this point. Track 4 is called The Spell. This was, like you said, one of the last to kind of get dropped from the set list as far as this album goes. This song, though, it is a perfect live song as far as I'm concerned. It's much slower than the prior two. Not a ballad by any means, but just like this keyboard heavy proggy song with just amazing verses. I think the chorus is pretty decent, and there's this slow build that kind of speeds up with every single verse, and it's just on full display here. This was a song that I never I don't know if I ever really appreciated, but this one has definitely grown on me over time, and I love the guitar solo at the end that just kind of fades out as the song ends. I just another standout track that has really grown on me over time.
Yeah, it just shows that, like, after two kind of fast-paced songs, you kind of kind of turn it back a little bit and with this more of a mid-tempo song, and it still works so well. There's just something about it that's just very, just kind of pulls you in, and I agree with you. It really made for a great live song, especially when, you can't expect a band to play like these blistering songs one after another. So to have something like this in their pocket, where at the same time it's also not like super ballady like the next track or The Haunting. This is just kind of just like a really standard mid-tempo Kamelot tune that I think is really memorable for kind of a slowdown kind of tune after those last two tracks.
Yeah, and it slows down even more with "Don't You Cry," which is the first of the true ballads on the album. This is, I'm not the biggest fan of a lot of ballads, but this one checks off all the boxes. Beautiful acoustic guitar, amazing orchestration, and quite frankly, I just can't imagine anyone else singing this song. So I'm almost happy they don't play this one live, because this has Khan written all over it. And what it really reminds me of, honestly, is like some of the ballads on Flow. I think of like Hold On. I think, without knowing who had their, kind of thumbprint all over this ballad, I think this is Khan through and through that kind of wrote this song, if I had to guess. But this helps show the band's diversity, because this is one of my absolute favorite ballads of all time. And I'll say this, they do an awesome French version of this song. It's one of the bonus tracks for the album. And it's the same exact song. It's just sung in French. And that's beautiful as well, just because, just the way that being a romantic language that it is, it flows very well on this album.
Yeah, that was the bonus track on the CD that I had years ago. I honestly don't even remember where I got this album. Usually I remember these things. This one is, I know I had it, I just don't remember from where, and I remember it had that bonus track. But yeah, this is also one of my favorite power metal ballads during this time. I just think it's so emotional, and the lyrics and just like you said, the orchestrations, everything about it. It's just a really, really beautiful song. I will say though, I would love to hear Tommy take a stab at this live, because if anybody could handle like something like that, I think him and a microphone and with an acoustic guitar playing, I don't know. I think he might be able to do this one some justice.
I want to hear it, but I'm hesitant. I have those reservations that I mentioned earlier. But now that you mention it, having heard him sing "Tears for a Father" live,
right?
I mean, you know what? Maybe you can twist my arm into it. I think I'm gonna pull back from what I said earlier. What are your thoughts on "Karma," the title track number 6?
This is probably my second favorite song on the album after "Wings of Despair." I love kind of the Middle Eastern vibe that kind of, I think they pulled over from the Nights of Arabia track from the previous album, which is another one of my all-time favorite Kamelot songs, arguably my favorite song from Fourth Legacy. But yeah, like you said, speaking of the gallop, this song starts out right away with that awesome drum kind of gallop, and then goes into this like really awesome kind of keyboard intro, and then you kind of hear like Khan like slowly fade into the song. I don't know. I think this is such a cool song, amazing live. If it would have been my song of the week if not for Wings of Despair, but yeah, this is a close second. Just an all around fantastic song.
It's funny. I never really appreciated this song until about 10 years ago. For some reason, it was just another kind of good track on the album when I first heard it. But going back to it about a decade ago, I think I realized the brilliance of this track, and now I absolutely adore it. And the way I kind of look at the album, this was kind of the last of side one of the album. And then, in my opinion, like The Light I Shine on You, the next track, is kind of the start of the second half of the album. If Karma is closing the first half, like I kind of am alluding to, it is a perfect side A of the album. It is just absolutely perfect and a fantastic, fantastic song. they still occasionally play it live, which is kind of awesome. Although I think it's been probably since 2015 may have been the last time they did it. But I think this track is like fantastic. And honestly, I'm not sure why I didn't appreciate it as much 20 years ago, but I love it now. And I agree with you. It may be the best song on the album, although it's not my personal favorite, but I think it's a gem. And what I was really curious about was to see whether or not like the second half of the album was going to hold up the way that I remember the first half holding up. And that's kind of what we get into with The Light I Shine on You.
Yeah, those first 6 tracks are.
Oof, I mean,
it could be.
What wouldn't you put that up against? I mean, find something much better. And I'd be shocked if you could find something that blows that out of the water.
Yeah, it'd be tough.
Yeah, but I think for an album to be truly great, the second half has to hold up as well as the first. I don't know if I ever even concentrated as much on the second half because the first half was so brilliant, but The Light I Shine on You is more of a mid-paced tune. Very, very nice chorus. I think that the verses are a little bit pedestrian. Not that they're bad. They're just a little bit kind of like a prelude to the chorus that's going to come. I think this is a good song. I do not think it holds up when you compare it to the stuff that came before it. And I'm just wondering if you think it starts taking a little bit of a step back at this point.
It's my least favorite song on the album. And I mean, that's hardly a knock on it because it's just the album's that good. But I just happen to think it's the weakest. As a matter of fact, I think this and the following song, Temples of Gold, are the 2 weakest songs on the album. But also they are kind of a tempo mood kind of change because then Across the Highlands is another, up tempo song. So I think that they kind of went, I think if they were going for that effect of it's kind of coming in waves, Forever and Wings of Despair are fast songs. The Spell is medium. Don't You Cry is kind of a slow ballad. Karma is, another mid-paced song, but really, has a lot of, it's like a real theatrical song, I guess you would say.
Mm-hmm.
So this is kind of more of a more mid, kind of just like a middle of the road mid-tempo kind of tune. I like Temples of Gold a bit more. It's I guess you could consider it another ballad. It's not as good as Don't You Cry, but it's a nice kind of chill. It's like a very chill song, I think.
I actually would describe it almost as a power ballad. That's kind of the way I describe it. It's got a cool acoustic guitar intro, and I completely forgot about that, to be honest with you. And then eventually the vocals kick in, and then the drums, and then the electric guitar join in. And at one point I thought I heard a sitar, but I could be wrong.
The end of this, the kind of, there's a definite Middle Eastern flair at the end of the song that I think is really cool. It's definitely the highlight of the song.
Totally. And this is not my favorite track. It's probably my least favorite track on the album. It has a bit of a whimsical or majestic feel to it as well. I don't know. I just think that, this was my least favorite. The Light I Shine on You was a touch better. I think we have that in reverse, but I think we agree. This is a little bit of a dead spot on what's otherwise a really, really fantastic album. Not that they're bad songs. It's just that I think that when you have 5 A+ songs in a row, even a B or a B+ track seems to pale in comparison to perfection.
Yeah, and I'll tell you another thing. I never really listened to the Japanese bonus track Once in Future King until now, and boy, they should have just crammed that in there somewhere because that song is a real banger for a bonus track. I liked it a lot. I think maybe if you cram that in between The Light I Shine on You and Temples of Gold, just so that you have one more real upbeat song, and so you're not having 2 kind of less than great songs in a row. Just a thought. I'm sure they had their reasons, but
or another option, which would be, you mentioned Across the Highlands. That is another track, which, quite frankly, if you put them in between the 2 prior tracks, this is a banger, and this is honestly, I think it's the most underrated song on the entire album. The keyboards scream Stradivarius to me. It is just upbeat power metal at its finest, and a song that they will never, ever, ever play live, and something I would kill to see. I loved this track. I don't think I ever appreciated it as much as I did this week. this is my track of the week, believe it or not, Across the Highlands. It's a bit of a simple riff, but this is a real like hidden gem in the back catalog, and this song has a lot of what the current power metal seems to lack for me. It's short, it's sweet, it's to the point, and it's just, not the best song on the album, but it was the one I think I enjoyed the most this week, kind of out of left field.
I've been witness to so many wars that I'm blind to oppression. No ability left to remorse. It's my faith and conviction. Wide awake in this world full of hate. I am bold, but I am damned if life itself is condemnation. I am immortal, thus my freedom is captivity. Flying all across the highlands, searching for a way to finalize my history. Rising high above the mountains, reaching for the sky, closer to my sanctuary.
This is a song that would have been my song of the week, like 18 years ago, maybe.
Really?
Because I was obsessed with this song when this album came out.
I did not know that.
I played it on my radio show in college all the time. I think I just played it so many times over the years that it's almost gotten to the point where I'd rather hear, Karma or Wings of Despair or The Spell or whatever, but you're spot on with everything you said. This is a beautiful power metal song, just a really great tune, and I think it's easily one of the best songs on the album. I'm not terribly surprised you chose it.
Yeah, I don't know that I ever appreciated it as much as you did back then, so you were definitely ahead of the curve on this, but 20 years later, I came around to it. It's fantastic.
I remember Knops really liking it too. I remember Knops. He wasn't the biggest power metal fan back in college, but he definitely dug Kamelot. I remember that, and I remember Across the Highlands being a song that he enjoyed.
Knowing his taste, not to go off tangent, I think he'd probably be more of a Conception guy, like Flow era Conception. I think he would just absolutely love, but this is just so accessible. I'm not surprised that he would like this. It's interesting. Like I said, maybe you flip those tracks, maybe you don't, but the album ends with a trifecta of songs based on Elizabeth Bathory, the serial killer from Hungary in the late 16th, or I should say the late 17th or early 17th century. I guess back in, she passed away in 1614. I won't get into the whole story there, but there is a trifecta of songs that end this album: Mirror, Mirror, Requiem for the Innocent, and Fall from Grace. And quite frankly, another kind of series of songs that I don't think I ever fully appreciated, but it is a really good trilogy. Mirror, Mirror is like a piano-led ballad that kind of gives way to an acoustic guitar, almost similar to Don't You Cry. Not quite as good in my opinion, but a very solid second ballad on this album. That's, again, not a power ballad, but a true ballad. It's got a bit of a long outro, but it leads into Requiem for the Innocent, which is another kind of a standard fare Kamelot track from this era. Not extraordinary, but a solid song with a fantastic piano solo at the end, ultimately leading to one of the best ending tracks on a Kamelot album, Fall from Grace. This song is exceptionally heavy, a real banger of a tune. I just love the mix where you can hear the vocals coming out of both speakers. I really thought that was a wild trip and something I never noticed to this point. It may have been fatigue when I was younger, but this trilogy to end the album is just a really awesome way to end a fantastic disc.
I agree. It's funny that you kind of broke it down into the three parts, because I always had the three tracks merged into one song, because to me, I feel like it just was one song. I just consider it Elizabeth or Elizabeth. I think I always liked this, but going back and listening to it again, it is really good. It might have just been a little bit too much after all of the great stuff that preceded it, and now you have like a 12.5 minute, three-piece, three-part song. But now that it's going back and kind of digesting the album on a whole, I think this was really a perfect choice to kind of finish things off. And I do love like the flavor of all three parts of it. I love the beginning, the first part, the kind of quiet keyboard intro to kind of get things rolling, and it just kind of like crescendos, I think, from the beginning all the way to the end, and just a really good way to kind of finish things off. And like I said, I really dug that bonus track, Once in Future King, which I don't think I got a hold of until I think Kamelot released an album with all their like B-sides and bonus tracks at some point, because like I said, I always had the version with the French Don't You Cry on it. So this bonus track was new for me.
You're doing something right when the bonus tracks are fantastic and the rest of the album is good as well. It means the material is certainly flowing, and great stuff. I think that we would really need to do a deep dive into one of the Tommy Karavik albums, to be honest with you, because as much as I like them, I just never listened to those albums, and I kind of want to go back to them. So something to consider in the not so distant future, maybe doing Silverthorn or something like that.
I thought Haven was excellent. The other two just didn't grab me quite as much. I thought Silverthorn had its moments. Shadow Theory did as well, but Haven start to finish, for whatever reason, I enjoyed the whole thing start to finish. So I don't know. I don't know that it kind of compares to Karma, but it's definitely my favorite album they've done since Khan left the band.
Yeah, I agree. Silverthorn was the best of the three for sure. I'm kind of.
I'm saying Haven is the best of the.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Haven. Yes, I'm sorry. I misspoke. Haven, I think, is the best of the three, and I think what's interesting is that like it was kind of sandwiched in the middle of the trilogy, if you will. I look forward to hearing the next one. It's been a while since we've heard some new Kamelot, so let's hope that that's what 2022 or 2023 has in store. Best Kamelot album, I think. Yeah, I'm going to come around and say it. I think that this is actually their best album, and I've kind of supplanting Fourth Legacy for me, just going back and revisiting it. And then obviously hearing Fourth Legacy as well. I actually enjoy this better. Scale of 1 to 10. I don't know that it's perfect, but it's darn near close for me. I'm giving it a 9. I just think that despite the the little bit of dead spot in the middle, this is close to perfection here and in rarefied air.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm gonna give it a 9.25. It's probably my favorite Kamelot album of all time. I think that those two tracks that just aren't on the same level as everything else bring it down a little bit. I almost gave it like a 9.375 because I feel like it's not quite a 9.5, but a 9.25 almost feels too low. So maybe I will. Maybe I'll say it's a 9.375. That makes me feel more comfortable.
I can assure you that is definitely a first on the Metal Exchange. A 9.375 given out by Mr. Nietzsche, but
I'm a mortgage underwriter. These are just different types of interest rates, as far as I'm concerned.
Maybe they can buy a point and bring it up to the 9.5. But maybe the bonus track. I think the bonus track buys at another point. But that's a discussion for another day. Before we get to next week's album, which is the first Monday of March, so it's going to be a request album. A couple of brief news items. The first, I feel like we're doing this far too often, but another passing. Procol Harum, a prog rock band from England. Gary Brooker has passed away, the singer, and what's disappointing, I will not claim to be the biggest fan of this band. I don't know a ton of their material, but I happen to really, really, really enjoy one of their albums. They came out with an album in 1968 called Shine On Brightly, and it's one of the first prog rock discs that I was aware of. And their last song was a 17.5-minute epic called In Hell 'Twas in I. And this was something that Transatlantic would later cover. So I had heard the Transatlantic version. I found out it was a cover. Then I went back and heard this song on this Procol Harum album. And it is just so far ahead of its time, and it's one of my favorite tunes. So when I got the news that Gary Brooker had passed, I was very, very saddened to hear that. It would actually be a fun album to cover at some point in the future, just because I think that the music is so interesting. But some sad news there. But on a little bit of a lighter note, the longtime drummer for Ne Abloscaris, Dan Presland, has decided to leave the band after 16 years. They are a very, very kind of under-the-radar prog band, I think, from Australia, if memory serves. But these guys are fantastic, and they've been gaining a lot of traction, I guess, with their last couple of releases. So hopefully they're able to replace him in the not-so-distant future and release some new stuff. Really, really interesting band. And staying in the prog realm, one of my low-key favorite prog bands from France, Spheric Universe Experience, has announced that they will be releasing a new album called Back Home. It is due out on May 20th of this year on Uprising Records. Under the radar band, very, very underappreciated, and they just have a really cool sound with these lush keyboards that I love. Definitely looking forward to this release. So May 20th will not be here. It can't come soon enough. I really want to hear this album, and it's been quite a while since they released something new. So looking forward to that.
Very nice. Hopefully you'll remind me of that one when it comes out.
Yeah, I will not forget. I have it on my radar. But a request for next week, which I found to be very, very interesting, because the band and the album that we are going to discuss is a band that I had only heard one prior album from and would never profess to be the biggest fan of this band, but it's something I think I would like if I ever gave it the time. The album is called Crack the Sky. It came out in 2009. The band is Mastodon, the American prog metal band that has been releasing album after album for over 20 years at this point. And a band that's actually going on tour with Opeth in the very, very not so distant future. A band that I don't know if you've ever heard, but we want to fulfill the request, because I do think that this is going to be a very interesting discussion, going back to an album, like I said, that I've never heard from a band that I am woefully negligent in my appreciation and understanding of.
I'm right there with you. What I've heard has been very few and far between. So I too am looking forward to listening something a little bit outside of my wheelhouse.
Yeah, it's interesting. And track 4 is called The Tsar Usurper. I won't get into it now, but very, very dark considering where we are in the world, but we'll get there. But yeah, Mastodon coming the first week in March, and then I have a little surprise for the second week of March, which I think should make for a very interesting episode that second week of March. But we'll get there next week. Thanks for joining us on your trip. I hope this was as fun for you as it was for me. I definitely enjoy talking about some Kamelot, and I look forward to cracking the sky with you next week when you're back in cold, chilly Rochester. We will catch you next week. Thanks again for joining us, and I hope you have enjoy the rest of the vacation, and I will catch up with you soon, bud. Talk to you later.
Thanks, pal. Take care.